On today's episode of That Mental Ginger Show, we are talking to comedian Stephen Catling. Yes, my faithful followers, first new guest of 2023. Stephen was absolutely brilliant. He's such a great guy, a really, really good comedian, and extremely intelligent. You'll find out more when you watch the episode. So let's cut to the intro.
All right, troops.
Stephen, it seems to be a once a year thing that we seem to meet up. How are you getting on?
I'm doing fine. I'm sure it was a bit more than once a year that we've met before, because
Oh,
I know we met at Mc McTrulet
McCool's.
McCules. Yeah, that one. I can't.
Yeah,
I see it and I'm like
yeah. Well,
McCules,
that, yeah.
McCules.
In fairness, like a
Uh,
couple of them that tried to pronounce it, it's had a different versions. One that I liked was
M-
McChillis,
McChullus. Oh,
which
that's
kind of,
like a like
yeah.
behold the mighty holy McChullus.
To me, it sounded like a special at Nando's.
Mm,
Try the new McChillis.
yeah. No, it
Uh,
sounds more like McJules would sound more
mm,
Nando's. McChullus sounds like the McDonald's version of it.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely. See, that's why you're the actual comedian, and I'm the one that just kind of plods in and plods back out again to get guests for the podcast.
that's a, I think that's very harsh on yourself there, and
Yeah.
very flattering on my part. But
Mm.
no,
Well, for
I'm
anybody
just
that is new to, what how we met, what we actually did meet February in 2022 as part of the Glasgow International Comedy
mm,
Festival. It was my first
mm,
time back on stage in 9 years.
mm,
And just getting to see the comedians, some that I knew from working with and other things previously, and then
yeah,
meeting new ones like yourself was just
yeah,
fantastic. And when I saw your act, I was completely broke with laughter. It was
mm,
fantastic. What
mm.
you done? You were absolutely brilliant, my friend.
Thank you. I mean that certainly back then in Glasgow, that was my first rodeo. It was just simply Scotland sort of introduction to me when it's not in the context of Edinburgh Fringe sort of thing, because I
Mm.
had moved up there to do my masters, so I never really performed much in Scotland
Mm. Well, that'll
prior to.
actually lead us into my first question, which is to tell my audience your origin story, because the one thing we all have in common is that we all have an origins. So, Stephen, for my faithful followers, please tell us your origin story.
Well, an orange story is quite broad, and it's not like I got bitten by a radioactive spider.
Yeah.
Um,
We'll start with the basics. Where were you born?
yeah, yeah. So I was born in Sheffield, to a mum and dad, like most people. Uh, um, but
There
yeah,
could be
and I
test tube
grew up
babies
in
out there. We don't know.
maybe. I mean,
It's a brave new world.
I'm not discriminating to those who were cloned in a lab. Um,
Every Star Wars
but
fan thanks you for that.
it good. All those Django Fett Juniors will feel much better. um, Junior, Boba, Junior. Uh, um, yeah, but no, yeah. So I grew in the south of Yorkshire. Um, had a childhood, relatively normal childhood. Um, like many children. Then went off to do biomed at Lancaster. Then worked for many years in biomed. Pandemic happened and was like, nah, I'm gonna do psychology. And I went to Glasgow to do a master's in psychology. That's the general gist. In comedy origin stories, like I picked that up when I went to my bachelor's, and then when I started working, after my a year after my I did finish my bachelor's, I started performing regularly on the British circuit, predominantly
Yeah.
in, and I hate to say this to a what I can presume is a predominantly Scottish audience, English audiences. Uh,
It's all
um,
right. What we have audiences in Canada, Vietnam,
mm,
Japan, what Russia.
mm,
So you're okay.
mm,
Don't worry. What even the
yeah,
Soviets will know that you toured in England first.
yeah. But yeah, predominantly, I've spent most of my comedy life on the Southern circuit,
Mm,
Southern English circuit with connections in the north, and then thankfully, uh, going up to Glasgow's significantly expanded that in more directions, just because
mm,
it's better to be able to wander and travel across the country and to do various gigs.
mm.
Um, uh,
So
do you want
how many
something more
festivals?
specific?
Well, I'm just going
Oh
to
yeah.
ask, like, how many festivals have you actually done, like comedy wise?
Um, so specifically where I've actually had my show,
Mm,
um, or one of my shows, I've done I did Camden twice,
mm,
as in two runs with Camden, not two separate shows at Camden
yeah.
Fringe, back in 2018 and 19. And then I did Brighton with two separate, unrelated shows in 2019 as well. Then 2019 and 21, not 21, 22, I've actually gone up to Edinburgh to perform to do spots
Mm,
with 21. I sort of was in a compilation show I was on the lineup of that, but it wasn't here's my own show, my own thing. I was meant to take up my first solo that I did in Brighton and Camden in 2019, up in 2020 to Edinburgh. But then we had plague,
mm,
as I keep saying to people. Um, um, and that kind of just put a spanner. And then I've completely written an entire new show just because I spent quite a long time working on that old show. And
mm.
it's not that old show, which I'm very proud of its name, very proud of what I did with it. Its name was Stephen Catling versus himself and other monsters. Um, because
I
we have
always
to
love the
acknowledge.
titles of solo shows because they're always so unique,
Mm,
like, and
mm,
what they have like a great perspective like on the
mm,
comedy or the comedians like self and their journey. But
mm,
one thing that really did want to ask you about was your process. What
mm,
and what was I've never written like a solo comedy show because what I would probably get eaten alive by my own fear and self-loathing. But when you do write like a solo show for yourself, like what is like your process about it? Is it do you think of something and just go, oh, I'll scribble that down for later, or do you have a kind of narrative like a point A, point B, and fill in the middle?
uh, you might gonna want to hate this, but I'm gonna say it's a little bit of column A, bit of column B.
No, that's
Like
that's fine. What your process is your process, man. I'm
yes,
interested.
okay. Uh,
Mm,
or maybe I'm just self-projecting there. But yeah, no. So no, I write things and then but then I also do have visions in my mind of ideas.
mm,
Um, so like my first ever solo wasn't really about anything. It was more of an anthology, more akin, less think Monty Python, Life of Brian, or The Holy Grail, where there was a sort of actual kind of plot, and more
yeah.
like The Meaning of Life, where there was no plot. Uh, it was just flying circus on
Mm,
big screen sort of thing.
yeah.
And that was kind of, it was more like connected ideas in terms of, and the title arose from the sort of nature of the material, which a friend of mine who, very good comedian, or though he's not active anymore, Stephen Trumbull, said to
Mm.
me, every set you do, you seem to be having some kind of existential crisis because you're either wrestling something physically or not physically in the story, or you're another animal or possessed by a demon. So I just thought of the idea with that the entire show is basically I am fighting myself.
Mm,
But then because there's usually other objects, things in, I needed a way to convey because a title, I think, well, a title and show imagery needs to convey also what that show's about, but also what that comic's sort of doing.
mm,
And I was very uh, pleased with like the design of the posters I made for that one, which
mm,
was I was dressed as a demon on one side,
mm.
facing me dressed as sort of in a sort of war boy-esque,
Yeah,
uh, ninja-esque get up, ready to basically fighting. So it's like, oh, that's you in that, and who's that?
yeah.
That's also me. Um,
So it was
and
basically
that's
like
without,
it was like your Mortal Kombat poster essentially.
yeah, yeah. I was doing my own Mortal Kombat poster with myself
Nice.
with blue flames on one side, red flames. So it's sort of like it was my own sort of commentary and ideas, but and it was touching on various things. I actually started getting onto some real things, which
Mm,
so if I take the current one I'm bringing up to Glasgow in March, just
mhm.
we'll fully plug that later.
Oh,
That
we'll be doing
one,
plenty of plugging for it, my friend, and don't worry, I
woo,
will be doing the same for you. What it's the
thank you.
same for anybody that I've shared the stage with. What if they've
Mm,
been gracious to give me their time, I want to give
mm,
back and help. It's not just a
mm.
tagline. So
Uh, unless it's STDs. Um, but
STDs, give back.
yeah, but not those. It's sharing is caring unless it's STDs. Yeah, so this one I'm writing does have a bit more of a um plot line because there is a in between and through this sort of thread of general sketch surrealist, which is sort of the escapism of the show.
Mm,
There is me talking about I am talking about some of the very horrible experiences I've had
mm,
uh, working in laboratories, both prior and during the pandemic,
wow.
which did include working at one point in animal research, um,
Wow.
which is that was 2 years of my life working in animal research, and yeah, that's a very intense field.
Yeah. Yeah, I worked in labs for a little while
Mm,
when I was with the NHS. It was
mm,
more kind of that just the getting the blood samples, urine
mm,
samples, poo
mm.
samples, that kind of stuff. And cataloging. I wasn't kind of in the nitty gritty side of it. In a way, maybe I
Yeah,
was glad. I don't think my stomach would have held out for it.
I mean, I've done the pathology side of that, so I've done the reception
Mm,
stuff. But then I've also throughout my career in that I went and did things like in virology for uh, when I wasn't doing a COVID testing labs. I was basically
mm,
in the virology unit, working running the machines, which actually not that particularly gory. It's just handling people's swabs
mm.
that they've stuck their, nasal and throat swabs, and then we're sorting that out, and then um, generally pretty tame. It's but then I've also worked, and then equally working in cytogenetics or hematology. That's obviously mean been exposed to a lot of different kind of blood samples or bone marrow.
Mm.
But they were even those sort of and bone marrow is you think, oh, that's blood, and then you're like, no, that's much thicker than blood. Um, it's more like a soup. Uh,
Wow.
that's fine. But working in animal research and just having to go into the freezer to clear out the cadavers, that was um, yeah, quite a feat.
Yeah.
As well as just on one side, it was the constant smell of shit as well from the cages when you're clearing them up, and yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, what I remember going into the freezers a couple of times. It was just more for lockup, like, and because obviously being ginger, I was like, I could live in here.
Yeah,
If it was like a scalding like warm day, like, and always had to stay very well air conditioned, it was the best time place to go to was the labs if you were sweating. Like, I'll take that sample down. That's okay.
yeah, yeah. No, that was trying waiting to unfreeze blood samples is interesting. Like, come
Wow.
on.
It's like, did you ever get to use the spinner? You know, when you put the blood samples in to take out the. I knew what it was at the time, but obviously you get the red at the top and you get the gill at the top because it kind of splits them. It splits the
Centrifuges.
blood cells. Yes, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I will have used centrifuges, um, especially when I was sort of working in a blood bank.
Mm,
I got to use those. Mainly with blood bank, it was separate everything from the white cells,
mm,
because they're useless and dangerous for
yeah.
us, so we can't use them. And then it's then separate the red cells from the um what's the term? Basically the plasma.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
so
the word that I couldn't think of. Thank you. You
yeah,
saved my bacon.
yeah. So because you want to separate, yeah, no, we separate them into two different baggies, basically,
Mm-mm.
uh,
Yeah.
through the machine, which sort of squeezes it out.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah,
Yeah.
um,
One of the things that I really like about like your comedy, because obviously we're here to promote your comedy. We want to let them know like, that you are a great comedian because you are.
mm,
And I like the way that you use like different types of music to help convey a
mm,
comedic point to get to a punchline. I love like your use of props, your use of costume.
yeah,
Like that it wasn't just like guy with
words.
Mike. Hello. It was a full stage
Mm,
performance. And
yeah.
like an immersive experience, and that's something that I really loved about it. Is that the type of thing that you'll be doing with the new show? What will there be
Yeah,
was
yeah.
yes.
No, there's never, if anything, it's got even crazier.
Brilliant.
For there's like I'm getting uh for one of the sort of critical pieces of the show,
Mm,
which I'm not going to spoil too much, but it has meant that for an entire month of gigging,
mm.
uh, um, I was basically having to go home covered in honey. Uh, and people are like, "How much are you spending on honey?" I'm like, "Aldi's actually quite cheap, but uh, it's but I have learned not to trust people with the actual jars of honey. I have to give them a squeezy bottle,
Mm,
because otherwise, I've given people like, "Here's this jar," and then they just pour the entire jar on me. I'm like,
mhm.
I appreciate the enthusiasm, but uh,
You're like,
and you
thank you, but like they just squirt a little, please.
just less, like, make it look like you've done, yeah. But yeah, no, yeah, and also I like using music. It was something that I figured worked really well at towards the end of 2018. I had the idea of what if I used music to
Mm,
convey it, and then it's been a great way of me able to set tones of sets, um, or even to be able to tell jokes without having to speak,
yeah.
which is tied to my own autism.
Mm,
Though I will say there are plenty of autistic comedians who don't do what I do as well and are very different
mm,
and unique and wonderful. I could name
yeah.
many like Luke Bolton, um, Harry Wright, Ian Lane, are some friends who are also
Mm,
all very good comedians in their own respective rights, but also very different to myself,
mhm,
um, in terms of their styles. Like, though again, some of them are also closer to me in that they do have their own little non-traditional styles of it, and others
mhm.
are a little bit more of the traditional side of stand-up. But yeah, no, for me, it's plenty of ways to communicate or make people laugh without even saying words.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is ironic.
Because one of your
Professional.
jokes that I loved from when we gigged together,
Yeah,
and it still sticks in my head, and it will for a long time. It was you asked someone to ask you about your childhood,
yeah.
and then you started playing the
Hindsight
Kill
music.
Bill, yeah,
Yeah,
and just stood there. The lights were going, like we were all killing ourselves laughing. What at that died down a bit, and then it stops. You just go, it was fine, and we just
yeah,
everybody just buckled. That always sticks in my brain because I just thought it's
mm,
such a great use of comedy timing, use of music, use of stage presence.
mm,
Just obviously from that side, directing and acting wise, I was like, this is brilliant.
mm.
This
It's
is the stuff I
also
like to see.
it's also a good example of misdirection,
Mm-hmm.
which is what a lot of comedy is misdirection with
Mm-hmm.
what we're portraying to the audience and with
Yeah.
and subversion in
Yeah.
there's like
Because we
theory of
actually
thought.
talked about that after the show. What you and I backstage, and
Yeah.
what what was obviously it was a very brief conversation because we were in between, different gigs and stuff like that. But it was great to actually get to have a chance to speak to you about that and get a wee bit
Mm,
of knowledge from you.
yeah.
It was like I was getting that wee kind of peek behind the curtain.
Yeah. Or behind the mask sometimes, which I do use a lot of masks.
Mm.
Um, and I'm quite fond of using masks. So no, there's still masks in the current show. Uh,
Hey, good.
um, just not some of the old masks haven't carried over from the old show, but that's
Mm.
just because I haven't come up with something for them yet.
Mm.
But that's future shows and materials, so
Yeah.
masks will always find their use.
Yeah. So
Again,
where aside from going to Glasgow, whereabouts is your show going?
so it's I'm doing a few more previews in London before I take it up to Glasgow, just because there's some fine tuning that needs to be
Mm-hmm.
done. As with any show, but every show is a work in progress anyway. So it's like,
Yeah.
um, then after Glasgow, it'll be more previews until so Glasgow is quite early as well in
Mm.
terms of the festivals. Um, but then the next ones I'm doing will be it'll be May in Brighton,
Right.
um, Brighton Finch. For anyone who's listening who's down that way, that'll be sort of mid-May. If you look at the Rotunda Theatre's website, which
Right.
also I'm doing again with them at their Buxton venue for the Buxton Fringe.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're also taking it to the Manchester Fringe um, uh, as part of that, because Manchester's a city that I'm quite fond of and
Mm.
have a lot of closeness because it was meant to be the city that I moved after I finished my bachelor's to be with all my uni friends at that point. But life
Mm.
happened.
Yeah.
Um,
Life tends to do that, doesn't it? It just tends to
yeah,
get in the
life
way.
finds a way.
Yes,
Jeff
definitely.
Goldblum.
There we go. We've got our Jeff Goldblum.
Yep, Jeff Goldblum. Uh, um, he actually he voices God in the I think it's Netflix series. It's on Netflix, or it was on Netflix. Happy, which is about an imaginary friend, uh,
Yeah.
and it's revealed that God is also like one of the biggest imaginary friends, but the imaginary friends are also actually real.
Yeah.
It's like a great show, but it's like, oh, it's God's Jeff Goldblum. Um, uh,
That's an inspired casting. Not since Morgan Freeman as God and Bruce Almighty.
yeah.
Have I thought of another casting that's more perfect than Jeff Goldblum?
I mean, I would like to see Brian Blessed personally as God. Uh,
I just want his voice. His
yeah,
voice. Well, if it doesn't happen for Brian Blessed, get one of the local comedians up in Scotland, Eddie McKenzie. He has the Brian Blessed voice down to a T, and I'm like, yep, he could definitely sub in.
Eddie is very much a Scottish Brian Blessed. I was actually thinking
Yes.
maybe the Scottish comedians. My brain went, "Oh yeah, we could get Billy Connolly, but he's retired."
Well,
Uh,
and in fairness, he tried to sue God, so
yeah.
well, that would be a conflict of interest.
Well, you sue God, then you become God. It's the logical
Hmm.
progression.
It does make
Um,
sense.
yeah. Just also, I would be interested to see how we do it. Also,
Mm,
because Billy Connolly has a tendency to die in films, even a
yeah,
Muppet film, as he's has famously said. Like,
yeah.
so I would like to see if he still dies, if he's
Uh,
playing God.
yeah. If we're going down
So,
that route, then I would have to get Sean Bean.
yeah,
And we go, that's why he constantly dies, because he's just having to go up and do a check-in,
yeah,
like review the new ones coming in, then come and they go, right, I'm coming back down. Got a bit more work to do down here. I'll die in my next film and we'll speak in a quote and next this time next year.
mm. uh, yeah. Sean Bean, very much the Jesus of the 21st century, just keeps dying for our sins, but because we keep sinning, he keeps having to die.
Yep. And
Uh,
then when the films where he doesn't die are usually quite bad. For example, Jupiter Ascending.
uh, that is a bad film.
Mm.
But I will also defend the Sharp films, um,
Mm.
or most of them. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, because there are
yeah.
ones that fall into the so bad they're good categories. I mean, mine's is the room. That's the one I always go back to. What the so
Oh
bad is
yeah,
good.
the Room is a magnificent piece of what the fuck
Yes.
going
Yes.
on in Tommy Wiseau's head.
And the disaster artist actually did it justice as well with how they interpreted that process of going through it as well. So, which was surprising from Seth Rogen and James Franco. I was really impressed.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. But sorry, we got sidetracked there. I was talking about
Yeah. That's
Ariel.
it's what happens in this place. So it's a place of tangents and a place of madness. That's how my brain basically works as well. But we're going through where you're taking your tour this year.
Oh, right, yeah. Um, Manchester, I said,
Yep.
right? That was the last one I
Yep.
said. Yeah, Manchester is. Oh yeah, because I said life, and then we went right.
Yeah. Then
Yeah,
we
I've got
got into the Goldblum.
Goldblum. Goldblum is God. So yeah, Manchester, and then finally, assuming that there's nothing in between, assuming I'm not taking it anywhere else beyond Edinburgh at that point.
Mm,
Then, well, I will. So yeah, I've named the festival. At the moment, I've got all the festivals I've booked, and the ones I've named are the ones that I've booked. But then it is all leading to Edinburgh,
mm,
as is many shows on the British scene tend to lead. They will lead to Edinburgh, uh,
yeah.
because it is the big fest. Still, it is the biggest festival. It's the most important festival as well.
Mm.
Uh,
It's one that like does have the name recognition, but I like finding out about the other festivals.
mm,
Like it wasn't until I like dipped my toe in the comedy that I found out about Brighton and Manchester and Leicester and all those places with the festivals. I was like, there is
yeah,
more. There is more. Then I was like, wait, Glasgow actually holds a festival?
yeah,
Hey,
no,
we got
I,
some representation.
yeah, no. I think I heard of the Glasgow Festival prior to even living in Glasgow as well. Like, I never would have thought I'd ever apply and intend to do it.
Mm,
Not because I wouldn't want to, just thought, why would I? But then I went up there and sort of like, yeah, I like Glasgow. I want to try it. Uh,
mm,
I've enjoyed the audience. They've been some of the most interesting audiences and entertaining audiences I've had. Uh,
mm,
like it is a two-way street. Like, you have like you have to enjoy the people you're performing to as well as vice versa. Otherwise,
mm.
it that's just a day job. Um,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I
um,
think you've summed it up perfectly
yeah.
of how it is. What and
Uh,
for one, I'm really glad that you've got a tour coming. What
mm,
I will be trying to blackmail bribe my parents so I can get time to come and see your show.
mm,
What because those pesky kids always are the reason I can
yeah,
never really make anything. What
yeah. But
what
yeah, like
so
yeah, I'll
drop the
tell you.
date. So drop the dates for Glasgow specifically, so I can blackmail my parents because they watch the show.
Oh, okay. So the specific dates for Glasgow are It is the a professional comedian had this prepared. Saturday and Sunday of the 18th and 19th of March at 7 p.m. at the Griffin.
Hey,
Uh, um, uh, and that would be the dates for that. And the show is behavioral problems,
mhm.
colon, something, something, autism.
Yes. Like,
Um,
because at the time of this recording, like the poster had dropped on the socials. Like
yeah.
I thoroughly liked that poster. Like it was,
Mm, mm.
it's something that you just go, Stephen.
Stephen did that.
Uh, yes,
Yeah, I
definitely.
very much have the on the nose approach to posters just because, as I said, I do a lot of physical stuff as well as
Mhm.
I am a surrealist first in
Yeah.
most of my comedy writing. Um, though I will be clear that's not specifically because, and I'll make it clear to anyone, I don't believe in writing with something with the intention of making it something.
Hmm.
For example, take dark comedy. I don't think a good dark comedian writes dark comedy because they're intending to make it dark, or
Hmm.
a surrealist because they intend it to. Uh, they just that's how they write, and that's how it comes out. That's just naturally how their funny
Yeah.
comes out. So, like,
Yeah.
I'm just to be clear, like, I'm very on the nose with how it because I know the kind of comic I am, and I know the sort of titles that I need to
Yeah.
work
And
with.
that's a great part though. Like, yeah, you know
Yeah.
who you are. You know who you are in a comedy sense. Like, you
Mm,
don't write to act like something. You are who you are, and that
mm,
takes even some of the best comedians still struggle with that. Like,
mm.
so that's fantastic. We are starting
No,
to come up on time. Like,
yeah.
Zoom, my producer is going. You have this time left. So I'll ask you the final question that I ask all my guests. If you could give one piece of advice to anyone struggling with mental health issues at this point in time, what would that piece of advice be and why?
Um, so this one might be more specific in regard to some of the experience I've had. Um, um, but consider the sort of environment you're in. Uh,
Mm,
for example, a lot of the source of my depression that I've experienced came from my jobs
mm,
and the industries that I've worked in.
mm,
And it's I'm it's fair. I'm not going to say just quit because that's not realistic.
mm,
But I would suggest look to see what you can do to find a way how to get yourself out in a way that like a transferable skill. So, for example, when I was at the Crick
mhm,
working in animal research, I used the information resources at the time um, to get training opportunities to then move out to the next stage.
mhm,
Um, while, but also, yeah, like there's always a way to move out. It's not as simple just quit. Sometimes you're gonna have to be there a bit longer,
mhm,
but it's better to try and go for something uncertain that might make you more happy in the long run than to stay in something that you don't feel comfortable being in anymore or like
mm,
being and don't enjoy and don't want to do. Otherwise,
mm,
you're just prolonging your own misery for some stupid ideas that we have, and that, if you're not working, it's somehow immoral,
mm,
or like these strange notions we've put in our heads due to what society's told us of how we
yeah,
should. So I'd say, yeah, I think that's
yeah.
sort of,
It's great advice, my friend, like, and really relevant. Like, one of the things that I frequently see on the socials is what I'm picturing. It says, like, don't say that rich kids are entitled because they like have money that they can do their passion for a living. Is
yeah.
like it just proves that if money wasn't an issue, like we would all be doing something creative or doing something that we love.
Hmm.
Like, and it's something that I always say like this is why I do the stuff that I'm doing now, what I want,
Mm,
what the pandemic was the revelation for me. I was like, there's got to be more. And I was
mm,
like, get back to doing what I'm good at, get back to doing something I love. And if opportunities come, fair enough. If they don't, keep going. At least I get to meet interesting people and talk to them and find out their stories and what and help to promote
mm.
what they're doing. What and as I say, like getting to speak to you, Stephen, what is it's been what fantastic. What you're a great guy. What
Thank you.
you're a
Likewise.
great comedian. And I really hope that my parents will look after the kids for me so I can get along to your show. Mom and dad, take the hint.
I mean, I would say bring your kids along, but no, don't bring your
Yeah,
kids to this one.
yeah, they're four.
Unless
They're
they're
four.
above
They would like the
16.
honey. They would probably eat the honey.
Yeah, they call it. Yeah, no. Fortunately, there's no nudity in the show, but there
Mm,
is a point where I will be in a sexy bee costume.
mm.
Um,
In
and
fairness, that's the point that I might have to be restrained.
yeah,
But well,
fair,
I've seen the poster. Well, it's very provocative, my friend. I
yeah,
approve.
yeah. No,
Well,
you'd be surprised how many women have hit on me on the online dating with that
yeah.
costume. They're like that's interesting. I'm like,
Mhm.
thanks.
Yeah,
What?
it is quite interesting. What when I first started going out with my wife, I went out as Dr. Frankenfurter for Halloween, and the amount of women that came up to me for photos and were like, "Oh, you look great," and I'm like, "Okay, have I missed the trick here?"
Yeah.
It was certainly an interesting one. But
Mm,
Stephen, it has been absolutely fantastic to have you on. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best for your tour. I will do my best to come along and give you the support that you deserve. And until
thank you.
next time, my faithful followers, I've been Andrew Durning. This has been Stephen Catling. Please
Catling.
go along to his tour. Well, trust me, you will not be disappointed. Until next time, take care. Stay safe. Bye
Thank
bye.
you.